How much money per month would make you happy? Nobody really asks that question. Not your bank, not your budgeting app, not your mom. How much? Not enough to survive, not enough to pay the bills, but to be truly happy. What does that number feel like? Most people have never actually thought about this. And the gap between the number that you're aiming for and what you're actually living on, that gap is where our anxiety about money lives. My name is Vincent, and this is Present Tense Finance. Today, we're going to find your number. The other week, I was chatting with family. We were on the way to a restaurant, and the topic of money came up. Nothing serious or formal, but I decided to ask the question: How much money per month would you need to feel happy? There was a slight hesitation, and one person threw out a number, and then another person was like, "Yo, that's too high." And then I asked that person, I was like, "Well, what's your number?" They just started talking about a number of things, but they didn't actually have an answer. What I soon realized was that people don't actually know the answer to this question. They're just guessing, or they're just talking about things that are not the answer. And here's what I noticed. I think with every sort of guess, with every hesitation, there was this sort of low-grade hum anxiety underneath, all the answers, all the pauses. And that's what the question brings up in people. It's not just about a number. It's about, what do I deserve? What is possible? What is enough? What do I want? This kind of piqued my curiosity. And I was wondering, why does no one have an actual answer to this question? It seems pretty simple. And what I landed on was that as a society, as a whole, we are conditioned to think about money in terms of obligations. I got bills to pay. What do I need to survive? How do I put food on the table? How do I maintain a social life and relationships? But these, are not directly tied to just, how much money do I need to be happy? We're not used to thinking about that number in those terms. And so when we try to answer that question at first, we can't really land on anything. Like it's kind of just floating. It's kind of just out there. And that floating number, the one we're kind of searching for or reaching for, but don't really have a solid answer, it usually sits right on top of a feeling. And sometimes that feeling can be uncomfortable. Like it could be shame. Sometimes it can say things like, I don't deserve to want more than I have. And sometimes it's maybe not so clear. Maybe it's just like this brain fog. I've never actually thought about this. I have no idea what the number is. But yeah, the number itself isn't actually a number. I think in some ways it's a feeling that's wearing a math costume. And it's hard to do good math when you don't actually know what you're solving for. So let's actually do this right now. I want you to actually answer this question, not just in your head, but out loud or even on paper. Grab a notebook, do it in a note on your phone, something where it becomes real. And don't think too hard about it. Don't think about what's realistic. Don't think about bills or obligations. Just what is the number that comes up, in your gut? What's the number that you feel? Pause the video if you need to. I want you to write it down. Now, here's the second part. How much money are you bringing in each month after taxes? What are you actually taking home? What's actually hitting your bank account? Pause again if you need to, and then write down that other number. More often than not, there is a gap between those two numbers. This gap is not a failure. It's just a map, and it's showing us the distance between where we are and where we're trying to be. And for a lot of people, the distance between those two numbers is actually smaller than what our anxiety might lead us to believe. There are times too when I've sat with people and we look at the gap and it feels impossible. But when we take a closer look, when we really look, the path seems closer than we might first imagine. Not necessarily easy, and we might need to make some adjustments, but we can start to see, and a path forward becomes visible. And so, before we close the video, we now have two numbers and a gap. Maybe it was surprising. Maybe it made us feel uncomfortable. But whatever it is that came up, that's useful information. That's our map talking to us. And so here's what I want us to do. Don't put the number away. Don't close your notes app and forget about it and wait until the anxiety comes back. Just keep that number visible somewhere for a few days. Maybe on like a bathroom mirror or like on your desk. Let the question kind of marinate and keep working on you. Because here's what I've learned. That the moment you name what you actually want, something begins to shift. The mental fog that's keeping you from seeing clearly can start to clear out. And the path becomes a little bit more visible. Not all at once, but enough to see the path forward. And if you want help talking about the gap, or maybe even closing the gap, if you want to look at those numbers together and start building something real, the link to book a free 30-minute discovery call is in the description. No pressure, no cost, just a conversation about what's actually possible. Because the numbers and the gap themselves are not a destination, but a starting point. I'll see you in the next one.